Here are 3 problems you may try. You may pause the video while you attempt the problems and resume the video when you're ready to hear the answers. Let's review the answers. For number 1, the product of those two binomials is 6x squared plus 31x plus 35. For number 2, the product of those two binomials is 4x squared minus 29x minus 24. And for number 3, the product of those two binomials is 25x squared minus 60x plus 36. I think it would be beneficial to review number 3. The problem asks to determine the product of 5x minus 6 times 5x minus 6. And we multiply the 5x times the 5x, and then the 5x times the minus 6, and the minus 6 times the 5x, and then the minus 6 times the minus 6. The product of 5x and 5x is 25x squared. The product of 5x and minus 6 is minus 30x. The product of minus 6 and 5x is minus 30x. The product of minus 6 and minus 6 is plus 36. Combine the like terms. Minus 30x and minus 30x is minus 60x. And there are no more like terms that we can combine. Therefore, the product of 5x minus 6 squared is 25x squared minus 60x plus 36. Here are 3 more problems you may try. You may pause the video and resume the video when you're ready to hear the answers. Let's review the answers. For number 4, the greatest common factor, or the greatest factor that the monomials have in common, is 3. Number 5, the greatest common factor is minus 6w to the 3rd power. And for number 6, the greatest common factor is 5x squared times y to the 4th. I think it would be beneficial to review the answer to number 5. Let's look at each monomial to determine the factors, and then we can identify the factors that the 3 monomials have in common, and then we can determine the greatest common factor. The factors of minus 6w to the 5th are minus 1 times 2 times 3 times w times w times w times w times w. The factors of minus 24w to the 4th are minus 1 times 2 times 2 times 2 times 3 times w times w times w times w. And finally, factors of minus 42w to the 3rd are minus 1 times 2 times 3 times 7 times w times w times w. To determine the common factors, we look and we see which factors do each of the monomials have in common. They have a minus 1 in common, so that's one common factor. It also looks like they have a 2 in common, and it also appears that they have a 3 in common, and it also appears that they have 3 of the w's in common. So our common factors, minus 1 times 2 times 3 times w times w times w, and therefore the greatest common factor is the product of those, which is minus 1 times 2 is minus 2, minus 2 times 3 is minus 6, w times w times w is w to the 3rd power. Therefore, the greatest common factor between those monomials is minus 6w to the 3rd. Here are 3 problems you may try. You may pause the video while you complete the problems and resume the video when you're ready to hear the answers. Let's review the answers. We were asked to factor the polynomial by unmultiplying the greatest common factor. For number 7, the answer is 3y times the quantity of y plus 4. For number 8, the answer is 5x cubed times the quantity of 3x plus 2. For number 9, the answer is 4x squared y to the 4th times 3y plus 2x. Let's take a look at number 9. In order to determine the greatest common factor, we need to determine the factors of each of those monomials. So let's determine the factors of each of those monomials. the monomial 12x squared y to the fifth, the factors are 2 times 2 times 3 times x times x times y times y times y times y times y. The factors of 8x cubed y to the fourth, 2 times 2 times 2 times x times x times x times y times y times y times y. Let's identify the common factors, pair of 2's in common, and we also have a pair of x's in common, and it also looks like we have 4 y's in common. Therefore, our greatest common factor is going to be 2 times 2 times x times x times y times y times y times y, which is 4x squared y to the fourth. Then we unmultiply the 4x squared y to the fourth from each of those monomials. So 4x squared times y to the fourth. And we have to determine what is contained inside the parentheses. If we notice in the monomial 12x squared y to the fifth, the terms that were not outlined in red are the 3 and the y. Therefore, contained in the parentheses is 3y. And similarly, we can look at the factors of the monomial 8x to the third y to the fourth, and we see that the factors that were not outlined in red are 2 and an x. So therefore, contained in the parentheses would be plus 2x. We can confirm that we have the correct answer by distributing the 4x squared y to the fourth to each of the terms contained in the parentheses. So let's check our answer. 4x squared y to the fourth times 3y, and then 4x squared y to the fourth times the 2x. 4x squared y to the fourth times 3y, that would be equivalent to 12x squared y to the fifth, and 4x squared y to the fourth times 2x, that would be equivalent to plus 8x to the third y to the fourth. Now let's check the original problem, and we see that that coincides with the original problem. Therefore, the factored form of that polynomial is 4x squared y to the fourth times the quantity of 3y plus 2x. Here are 3 more problems it may try. You may pause the video while you complete the problems and resume the video when you're ready to hear the answers. Let's review the answers. Number 10, the factored form is x times the quantity of y minus 2. In number 11, the factored form is minus 1f times quantity of e plus 3. And in number 12, the factored form is quantity of y minus 5 times the quantity of y plus 2. I think it would be beneficial to review the answer to number 11. We have 2 monomials. In order to determine the greatest common factor, we need to determine the factors of each of the monomials. The monomial minus EF, the factors of that monomial are minus 1 times E times F. The factors of minus 3F are minus 1 times 3 times F. Let's identify the factors that they have in common. It appears that they have a minus 1 in common, and it also appears that they have an F in common. Therefore, our greatest common factor between those 2 monomials is minus 1 times f, or minus 1f. So what we are to do is we are to unmultiply minus 1f from each of those monomials, and we have to determine what is contained in the parentheses. And notice in the factors of minus ef, the e is not outlined in red. Therefore, that is the factor that's going to remain in the parentheses. Similarly, we look at the list of factors of minus 3f, and we see that the 3 is not outlined in red. Therefore, that is the factor that is going to be contained in the parenthesis. We can check our answer by distributing the minus 1f to each of the terms contained in the parentheses. Minus 1f times e and minus 1f times plus 3. Minus 1f times e, that's going to be minus 1ef, and minus 1f times plus 3, that's going to be a minus 3f. So we can simplify this to be minus EF minus 3F, and let's check and make sure that was what we had originally, and it was. Therefore, the factored form of minus EF minus 3F is minus 1F times the quantity of E plus 3. Here are 3 examples where we're asked to factor the polynomial. Notice in each of these polynomials there are 4 monomials that comprise the polynomial. What we do is determine the greatest common factor between pairs of the monomials. In example A, we have the monomial 4m squared and minus 12m. The first thing we should do is we should determine the factors of the monomial 4m squared and the factors of the monomial minus 12m to determine the greatest common factor between those two monomials. The factors of 4m squared are 2 times 2 times m times m. The factors of minus 12m are minus 1 times 2 times 2 times 3 times m. Now we can identify the common factors. It appears we have a pair of 2's in common, and we also have one of the m's in common. Therefore, the greatest common factor between those two monomials is 2 times m, or 4m. Let's look at the factors of the monomial 10m. The factors of the monomial 10m are 2 times 5 times m, and the factors of minus 30 are minus 1 times 2 times 3 times 5. Let's identify the common factors. We have a common factor of 2, and we also have a common factor of 5. Therefore, the greatest common factor between those two monomials is 2 times 5, or 10. Once we have identified the greatest common factor between each pair of those monomials, we can unmultiply that greatest common factor from each of those pairs of monomials. The greatest common factor between 4m squared and minus 12m was 4m. So we are going to unmultiply 4m from each of those monomials, and we said that the greatest common factor between the monomials 10m and minus 30 was plus 10. So we're going to unmultiply a plus 10 from each of those monomials. Now, what should be contained in each set of those parentheses? In the list of the factors for 4m squared, notice one of the m's is not outlined in red. Therefore, that is going to be contained in the parenthesis, as well as, let's look at the list of factors for minus 12m. 3 is not outlined in red, nor is the negative 1. So contained in those parentheses is m minus 3. That's minus 1 times 3. Let's look at the list of factors for the 10m. Notice the m is not outlined in red. Therefore, we're going to have an m contained in those parentheses. And similarly, let's look at the factors of minus 30. Notice the minus 1 and the 3. They are not outlined in red. Therefore, we're going to have a minus 3 as the second term contained in that parenthesis. Notice we have a factor of m minus 3 in each of those terms. That is a common factor. Therefore, what we can do is we can unmultiply m minus 3. And when we unmultiply that m minus 3 from each of those terms, we're left with 4m inside the parenthesis as well as 10.